So I'm Laura Levitt, and I teach history here. And just as a side point about the role of the library, one thing that I realized was the power of the library was when I learned that I had tenure because the librarian called me, and it's because they were typing up the notes for the state legislature, and they let you know first. So they really are sort of on the ground level on everything. It's my pleasure to be able to join this celebration of Diana and her photographic work and legacy. I met Diana when she generously donated her photographs to UMass. Of course, I'd seen her photographs forever. My position is as a 20th century US women's history professor at UMass. And I knew these images, but I didn't necessarily know who had produced them. And I see some of the people who are in these images that have been on my textbooks and in my life for so long. It's so exciting. As Diana worked on her collection in the archive, she would often stay at my house, and I persuaded her to lecture in my women's history course about her life and her photographs of the women's movement. It's a rare and special opportunity to make history come alive with a witness like Diana. It is even more important to have a photographic record such as the one that Diana has produced in an age when everyone has a camera in their pocket and not a meal goes by without some photographic documentation of it. My students understood the importance of getting the visual dimension of Diana's work. But I wasn't sure that they would appreciate what really went into being a photographer before the iPhone. And so it was important to have somebody who was there who could sort of talk about that history of photographs. Of course, my students loved Diana's presentation, and I want to read to you some of their comments. One student wrote, "Though we can learn so much from articles and journals, photos of an era in history are unique types of sources that give this history life and make it more personal in a way that they capture that very moment. They have the ability to almost bring us all back to that moment and witness the event." And I really believe that you make somebody a historian. And I truly believe that everyone is eventually a historian. Some people figure it out earlier than others. You get them to understand another perspective. And that's what history is about. Another student commented, "Diana Mara Henry was obviously adept at capturing moments that would have otherwise gone undocumented or unnoticed. These moments that have solidified into history contain sideways glances, raw emotion, and the essence of movements that have been captured in a way that academic papers can only grasp at. These images can do more than inspire. They allow for representation and embodiment." That's what they wrote in their comments. I think it really made an impression. As you can tell, they were captivated by her work, and in fact, the most common comment was inspiring. Many had never thought of photography itself as a form of activism. I dare say that once we say that, it makes sense to all of us, right? Especially in this moment, the importance of capturing something. Some students realized for the first time that your job can allow you to make a difference in the world. And that was something else that was really important to getting them thinking about ways that they wanted to live their life and what they wanted to do. As a side note, and this is just to give you some idea of the importance of the history part of it, one of Diana's photographs also introduced to my students the difference in the titles of the term Miss, Mrs., and Ms. There's a photograph that was up at the head of the archive that had a person holding a sign that was protesting, I believe it's the New York Times inclusion of the word Ms. And I knew this history. I assumed they knew this history. They didn't know the history. And in fact, it was remarkable how many students commented on what a revelation it was to them that women were fighting to have a kind of way of being addressed that did not immediately identify their marital status. Something that was surprising to me as a historian and would never have come out if it had not been for us looking at a document from the moment of history. While we're here primarily because of her photography, I would be remiss as a historian if I did not mention Diana's also amazing work on the history of the Natzweiler-Steinhof concentration camp operated by the Nazis in France during World War II. She had been researching Natzweiler for years, scouring through sources, many of them in French, and has produced a wonderful book, Call Me Andre, about Andre Scheinman, a French resistance fighter, spy, and inmate at Natzweiler. Diana's photographs are an amazing resource for UMass and for everyone. Inspired by her photographs of the 1977 National Women's Conference at Houston, for which Diana was the official photographer and had the wherewithal to have herself designated as such, I'm launching a project with Diana and with some students at the university and scholars elsewhere on Black feminism in the 1977 conference, which Diana's photographs will serve as an anchor for the book. We're hoping to really think about the impact of the women's movement and of the African American women who have often been ignored by the narrative that we tell of this story. Once again, it is about the images themselves that really capture what happened, and we're hoping to sort of follow up on the images and to give a narrative. So I wanted to just share with you what it means to be able to teach with these photographs and to bring them into the students here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Carole Kinnear. I'm the Director of Development and Communication here at the libraries. It's a treasure to see so many friends of the library, some silver, some very silver, and some very gold. And there's no truer friend of the library than Diana Mara Henry, who 6 years ago, I think it was 6 years ago, began her work of installing her rich collection here. We simply could not be, as Stan said, this excellent library without our friends. And we've served the students, the faculty, and the Commonwealth. And so thanks to everybody's generosity, we are able to do that. Here's a note from Gloria Steinem, who, if not for her book tour, would be here to honor Diana as well. She says, she writes, Diana Mara Henry not only had the foresight, energy, and caring to record a history that media at the time often thought unimportant, she also had an open heart and democratic spirit that caused her to record the people who were really there and working, not only those who might have been thought newsworthy at the time. Not only was she present with a camera, she was present with eyes that could see the many who might have been forgotten without her record. I'm very grateful to her, and I think the future will be more and more grateful. Gloria Steinem. When we began putting the program together for today, it was Diana's awesome inspiration to include people pictured in the photographs and to find them. Her expert eyes have captured so many important moments in time for so many. And I think unique, she has tried to keep in touch with as many of her subjects as possible. Mindful that from every single one of those important moments captured, an important life continued to unfold from that moment. I know firsthand it is a rare gift to have Diana turn her honest and engaging eye on you. Just last year when I visited her in Vermont, she pulled out her latest device, a GoPro camera. And soon enough, I had a gift of a video from Diana, a chance to reflect on a moment in time we shared as seen through her lens. We are honored that the special guest to follow could make time and travel distances to be with us here today. And so I just want you to start to hear their stories. And so we'll just ask them to come up in the order on the program, starting with Melba, and tell us about their lives and the moments captured. So Melba Toliver.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, everybody who's here. First, I want to apologize for my appearance because I brought a dress and I just never had a chance to change into it. So my friend who traveled with me from Martins Creek, Pennsylvania, we are just casually, but somebody said, oh, don't worry, because in Amherst, it's casual, be comfortable. So this is it. I also want to admit that I am no good at geography. I thought you all were in Boston. That's where we were yesterday evening, and I was saying, why is it, we're supposed to get there in 4 hours. Why is it taking us 6? So that's a long story. But anyway, so I get no props for geography. I'm glad that I did get here in time to be here, to be with all of you. I want to say also, well, before I really want to thank everyone who has just made this special occasion for a very special human being, Diana. She exemplifies what I call the 3 Ps of success: passion, persistence, and a couple more. But the passion that she has had for the photography that she has done, the persistence in sharing her work, and the practice. By practice, I mean like a physician has a practice or an architect has a practice. Photography is her practice and has been the skill, the ability, the talent that she's used, not just to capture moments, but to really reveal more than what we might think we're looking at. And often in her photographs, it's something about after the moments that she's captured that has you thinking about the people in the pictures and the narratives that are in their faces. So I am just so thankful to all of you who have supported Diana, who have seen the value of her work, who have helped to make it possible for her to find a home for her work, which is so valuable, and other people have spoken about it in other ways and who understand this better than I. Members of the faculty, people responsible for this library who knows what it means now in this moment and what it's going to mean for future generations. So thank you very much for that. I want to just insert something here about, just to warn the Senator Rosenberg, who wants to, to be young. Remember A Portrait of Dorian Gray. Be careful what you wish for. You might get it. Yes?
Can you tell us what you remember about the moment in this picture?
I will. I'll get to the point. What I remember about the moment in this picture is that I don't remember anything about the moment in this picture. Because at the time, I had just moved from the ABC local station in New York. I had been on a sabbatical for a year at the University of Michigan and came back to a news station, WNBC, in New York. This was one of my first assignments in coming back off of a year of being away from New York and away from news and being refreshed about what it is to be a broadcaster, a TV journalist. And this, I was given this assignment. First of all, I was assigned to cover the selection of delegates to the Houston Convention, delegates from New York. That happened in Albany, New York. And then I was assigned to cover the conference in Houston. And my concern then was being at a news station, and how was I going to cover this event in such a way that would be true to some of my thoughts and beliefs and philosophy about news coverage, and also how was I going to do this in a way that my new employers were going to be happy with. It turned out it was, the coverage was fine, people appreciated. That particular photo, I was not aware of Diana I never heard of Diana, and even if I had heard her name, it wouldn't have meant anything to me. You can see from the picture, I'm concentrated on that manual typewriter that's in front of me, and I was typing a stand-up to be included. For those of you who don't know what a stand-up is, when the reporter is standing up and saying, you know, we're here in Houston for this first remarkable conference of women from all across the nation, blah, 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 blah. Then you go to film, then you come back and you say, this is Melba Toliver in Houston reporting for WABC TV. And that's the kind of writing that you did for TV. So that's what was behind that picture. And as you can see, I am deeply, deeply engrossed in putting this story together. Because one of the things about being a TV reporter back in the day is people always think that you're just a pretty face, even if you're not. But they think that you don't do any writing, that it's just all about posing and primping and blah, 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 blah. But one of the difficulties about, and that this photo I think illustrates, is that you are trying to take a tremendous event and to condense it into a minute 45 to really be able to give people who weren't there a sense of all that's happening there. And it's very difficult. And it requires you to be very focused, as happened in this what Diana captured in this photograph. I was just quite surprised to find a few years ago about the photograph myself, and to know more about Diana, and to, as I said, to admire her passion for her work, her persistence, and her practice, her committed practice to the work that she has done. So, Diana, thank you. I am so pleased and so happy for you and for all of you. Thank you.
Next we have Clara McLaughlin to speak to us all the way from Jacksonville, Florida. And she hasn't frozen yet, so that's good.
Thank you very much. I am so honored to be here. I never expected it. And when I saw the picture, it was mailed to me with me and my daughter. And we were just so excited. I was saying, oh my God, Renetta, look at you. You have your legs up. But you had popcorn between your legs because you were eating. So nobody saw it. But anyway, it was such an honor because Renetta, I was on the board of the YWCA and they wanted a singer. I used to sing. I ain't singing anymore, but they wanted Renetta to sing because I used to sing. So she had to sing the God Bless America for the first Women's Rights March in Houston. And it was really amazing. I did not know that a photographer was there taking picture or anything. We were there because of what we believed in. And that belief started, I guess, all of my life, because I've always worked to help things that I felt was important to us as females and blacks, okay, minorities. As a matter of fact, when she was a baby, we moved to Houston, and I watched TV for the first time. I wasn't really watching it before. We had it, but I didn't care for TV. And I wrote the FCC, petitioned the FCC to allow Houston to drop a channel into Houston that would show women and minorities in a more positive way. Because I've always felt that it was our responsibility to make things happen. When I was at Howard, I got there and I wanted to major in journalism, and they said, we don't teach a major, you can minor in it. No, you can't get any place. You're talking about black power here now, okay? How you gonna have black power and you have no ownership in the media? No power. As a matter of fact, Ted Turner, I went to him in Atlanta, and I said to him, I want to use your news on my channel. I had just gotten the authorization for a CBS station in Longview, Texas. I was the first black woman to do something like this, but I needed to have news. And he said, well, Clara, you know, you wrote the book, we'll have you on the air. I said, you don't understand. I don't want O-N, I want O-W-N. Okay? That's important. So that's me, and I've never changed from that. I now have the newspapers in Florida, the Florida Star, the Georgia Star. I now have channel 18.2 TV, and I do weekly 2 shows every week on radio, all with the same goal, to give us a more positive image about women and minorities. So I haven't changed. I'm still, at 76, I'm still the same person. Thank you so much for having us.
And is Ed Murphy out there? There he is. Welcome.
Well, everybody here knows about Diana's eyes and the camera. And hopefully by the time I'm done, in a couple of minutes, we'll know more about her ear and her heart. Because I think I guess I need to talk about myself, but I want to get to that through myself. Diana gave me the title here, Spiritual Warrior, so I feel like I should at least identify what that's about a little bit. And it was given to me in a film that somebody did, a documentary about me. But I met Diana in 1970, and prior to that, I'd been in a Catholic seminary from 1963 to 1966. And while I was there, I learned about something called the worker priest movement. And the worker priest movement was something after World War II. Priests who had not really done all the best things during World War II. The young priests wound up taking their collars off and becoming longshoremen, truck drivers, and factory workers, and walked alongside their parishioners as civilians and people who tried to help people. Now, I'm not a priest, but something that really affected me when I left the seminary. What I really wanted to do was economic and social justice. However, I took a detour. I enlisted in the Army. I became an intelligence agent. I went to Vietnamese language school, and I was in Vietnam in 1968-69, and I was involved in something called the Phoenix program, which was the CIA's assassination program. When I came back to Staten Island, that's when I met Diana. I exposed that CIA program, and that gave me some attention. But Diana interviewed me. She came to interview me, and she came to my father's house and sat down and listened. And she wrote down what I had said, and she listened to the essence of what I was saying, and she wrote a series of 3 articles about me. Now, it's nice to have somebody take your picture. It's nice to have somebody write about you. But sometimes when that happens, either you objectify the photographer or the writer because they're doing something for you. And they either do it well or they don't do it well. But as a photographer, the writer, you can do the same thing. You can objectify that person and not really create that dialogue. Diana and I developed a dialogue. And that dialogue and our friendship has lasted for 46 years. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the things we did around each other. So in 1970, in the spring of 1970, she left to go to Tennessee to work for Senator Al Gore, Sr. The next time I met her was 2 years later on the ferry boat to the Statue of Liberty. She was doing photography for George McGovern. I was a McGovern delegate. And she took a classic photograph of George McGovern here, me, Ed Murphy here, and the Statue of Liberty. A photograph that represented everything that I believe and is the essence of my life. I grew up in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty. Immigration, to me, is core. It's what America is. And for my language as a Catholic, it's a mortal sin, what is happening in America today, of trying to close the doors to immigrants. And I've held that value, and maybe that's where I have the spiritual warrior. The thing for me, you could find a Vietnam veteran in 1970 who was opposed to the war. But to find one that was an ex-seminarian, somebody who had been in intelligence and an expert, and then exposed the Phoenix program, and coming back to VFW territory, where I got letters from the, quote, Committee of 100 Irish Americans, who said to me, your mother must be a Jew, because only then would it explain what you are doing. So the animosity that's there of the 70s, the 60s, and 70s, let's not forget that. This is not, you look at history and you think these things just happen, and they happened on their own. It's by leadership and people doing that. So I was an interesting subject. But I didn't recognize it till years later, that as a Vietnam veteran, I was also a human being. I had my own pain and my own frustration, my own sense of, betrayal, and I needed to be heard. Diana listened. So not only did she take pictures, but she listened, she observed, she participated with some of the people that she did it with. And I consider her, and I told her on the phone the other day, that my healing from the war in Vietnam in many ways has something to do with Diana Mara Henry, because she listened, she understood, and she represented me well. That's a standard we want in journalism. And now, I'm not going to mention the man's name, although I'm tempted. But at the Democratic Convention in 1972, I was interviewed by a CBS national correspondent. He had his story, violence. And when he interviewed me, he said, what are you going to do as the Vietnam veteran against the war was a delegate in the convention, and the VVAW was outside. And he said, what are you going to do if McGovern doesn't get the nomination? I said, well, I plan on him getting the nomination, so I haven't really thought about it. He said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, we'll do whatever we have to do when we have to do it. I mean, it was like thinking. He said, are you threatening violence? His image as a Vietnam vet, if he'd listened to me, he would have understood that I had made a change. I was very much involved in nonviolence. I was involved in the War Resistance League. And he had his story that I was going to be, and the Vietnam vets were going to be violent. I was stunned by this. If he had listened to Diana Mara Henry, he would have understood. You listen to what people have to say before you start making judgments about them. So I think about that. So I was there, and I'm at the convention, and I asked Diana if she wanted to come to my wedding. I was getting married. An interesting wedding, by the way, and some of it's in some of the photographs. In my seminary, I spent a year, pretty much a year in silence and meditation. And a friend of mine, Ed Guinan, had turned that novitiate into a peace camp. And my wife Lynn and I were getting married there on August 6, 1972, my 27th birthday, and the 27th anniversary of the atom bomb. The psychic imprint of my life is the dropping of the atom bomb and my mother, quote, dropping me at the same time. So I asked her if she wanted to come to the wedding, and she said yes, and we talked, and I said, you want to do the photographs? And she did. And she documented that. So I have that. Then a year later, I ran for borough president of Staten Island, and she was the photographer for that. And we did different things, and with Paul ODwyer, who became city council president, and the subways, did lots of stuff. So she donated basically her skills for social justice. And I think those are the kind of things that are really important. My wife Lynn and I went to San Diego. She went to grad school. We lost contact where we stayed in touch a little bit. And when my son was 7 years of age and my daughter was about 12, we went to California to go to a wedding, and we stopped by Carmel and spent time with her and her daughter. And our friendship became deeper and deeper. And then when she came back and we were back here, we were in Saratoga, we got to know each other around here, and then she moved to Vermont. I invited Diana to speak at a women's conference that my organization called the Workforce Development Institute, in the labor movement. We were doing things like that. So the key thing for me, really, about, as I close this, is about the ability not just to have somebody take pictures of you. And when you see somebody doing that, it's the fact that people like Melba and Clara or Gloria Steinem, and you go down there, They became friends. People respected each other. Everybody was in this together in many ways, and people played off each other to do lots of good things. And I think that became an essential part of friendship. I'm honored, Diana, I'm truly honored that you invited me here to speak. I feel a little embarrassed about talking about myself, but this is a day about you, but I guess to understand that, they have to do that. What I want to say in closing is that somebody was asking me before, I think Maureen, it was you, it was about, does the photograph make the man make the photograph, or whatever, does he have a history of the event? I think there's a dialogue that happens there. Because Diana wrote about me, there was a dignity, and my work had more meaning because it was documented by her. The photographs, the same thing. They became real. It leveraged me to do good work. And I think that on a very deep level, I took myself more seriously because Diana articulated what I had to say. I took myself more seriously and more meaningfully because she took great photographs and empowered me to, when I'm running for office, all that, to do that. And I've used her photographs in a couple of books that I've done. I did a book with my daughter called Vietnam, A Father-Daughter Journey, and I'm doing a piece of mine, and she's given me permission to use these photographs. I think it's had a profound effect on healing from Vietnam, my ability to do whatever I call the work of priest or spiritual warrior, because I was enhanced by her, and I was dignified by the quality of her work, and to do that. So I'm really happy about that. I'm grateful. The people who have any way have benefited from my work have benefited from the fact that she did this. You encouraged me, you facilitated me, and I'm proud to be your friend. And I mostly just want to thank you, Diana, for being who you are. And I love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And then we have Judy Tom McCarthy, Apache Elder. Welcome.
I consider it an honor to have been asked to come here. I haven't done things that move mountains, but I like to feel like I've done some things that will change the world, and have changed some of the people I've touched. My grandmother and grandfather both taught me there are things that you do if you're going to be a human on this planet. And the number one is to make it better because you were on it. And so, the other one was to be a good person. No one can say anything better about you in your life than when you die and they say, that was a good person. Or when you're living in general, they say, that's a good person. The greatest compliment that you can be given. And nobody can tell you who that good person is. You're the only one who knows that person and knows how to be as good as you can be, not as good as somebody over there thinks you should be. So anyhow, that's just a little bit of, I was very nervous about this. I've been asked to speak a lot of times, but usually it's not so personal in this, like this. Diana asked me to talk about what happened to me because of Houston. I was an Indian kid. When I was born, well, I'm still Indian, but when I was born, my family lived in an encampment, the whole clan, at the base of a mountain range in Arizona called the Bradshaws. My grandfather had been treated very badly. He and my great-grandfather were warriors with Cochise. Cochise was our big chief, but then there were a lot of other chiefs under him. And so they were warriors. When they were talked into giving up their guns, they were shipped off to Florida, Oklahoma, and just a very small number of them that most people don't even know about, this is in my family history, were sent to Texas because they were trying to build Texas at the time, and they needed more slaves and thought these men were young and strong and they could be good slaves. They forgot Apaches know the desert really well. So not only did my grandfather and a lot of the other young Apache men escape, they took an awful lot of the black slaves from the South with them. And so one of my grandmothers came from that group. So that's how I was born. I was sent to Indian school when I was about 10, right in there. And I didn't do very well. I truly hated it. The first thing they do when you go in there is they cut your hair, you know, because that's part of who we are. And then after that, I was sent, because I wasn't so good, I was considered incorrigible. They sent me to a residential Catholic girls' school. And so I like to tell people I'm a recovering Catholic a lot. But I got married when I was 15. When Houston happened, I had 5 children. I had been briefly in law school, but I got pregnant and was very sick, and so I ended up in a hospital. And I had spent the 9 months prior to Houston in the hospital. And I was not giving up my position as a delegate. I said, no, I'm going. And so my doctors had to put together a medical report in all my papers so I could go to Houston. And the Arizona delegation took care of me, but I had a special mother. Her name was Vera Brownstar, and she was Yavapai Apache, so we were kind of close in people. I started all of that because I was damn angry. I've never been so angry as I was in that time. I almost died because I was so angry. And I said, it's not fair that women like me, who are poor, are treated like they don't exist. My ex-husband was, at the time, of course my husband, had been injured, he was disabled, and we were on welfare. I can't tell you how often I had heard negatives about welfare and lazy Indians who were afraid to work. I also had an issue with the whole process of people of color trying to change things, because every time I was in a meeting when they said people of color, they weren't talking about my people. We weren't even there. So I began to speak up. I was also angry because American Indian women were being sterilized without their knowledge or consent. Our babies were being taken away from their mothers and sent to white homes and raised by white families, and these children never knew who they were. And I didn't know what to do about it. I had no education. I got a paper saying I graduated from the 8th grade from the Catholic school, but I never really went to school. And then accidentally, I found out about community colleges. Do you think the welfare system ever told me? No, they didn't. So when I found out about community colleges, I said, I said bad words. This needs to stop, and it needs to change, and it needs to be for all women, not just a few women, all women. Women in this day and age, women in the 70s and even now, when I say warrior, I mean that's all women are warriors in this country. And in almost any other country, we have to be to survive. Anyhow, I get a little too excited. My grandmother said I was the talkingest Indian she ever knew. I could talk my way into and out of more trouble than any child. And it's true, I have. Luckily out more than in. Anyhow, I was angry, so I started a small organization in a community college because that's where I found out I could go. The welfare department penalized me because I wanted to get an education that wasn't in their program. So my ex-husband was rather a violent man, and I finally stood up to him and he said, you're not going? I said, yes, I am. If I don't go, I walk out this door and you will never see me again. So we finally made a deal. Okay, you can go to school, but you have to make straight A's. You make 1B, you quit. I graduated ASU with my bachelor's with straight A. I have a 4.0 all through my school because I was afraid. Nothing like that to steer you on. Anyhow, I was just getting ready. I had transferred to ASU. I was pregnant. I was sick. I had been elected as chair of the Women's Affairs Board at Arizona State University. I was making some changes there, just things that I could do, like having an orientation that showed women where the bathrooms were and getting to on the campus, because it's a big spread out campus like most of them now. And I heard about this Houston thing, and I went, what the heck is that? What's going on? So I got all this information at the Women's Affairs Board and started handing it out, and friends asked me if I was going to run. And I never thought about it. And so I started reading, and the more I read, the more I thought, this I can do. This, if I do it, maybe I can make a difference. So I ran. I had learned I was taking graphic communications. I wanted to be a commercial artist and work in advertising, because we didn't call it art. We just did art on everything when I was little. We were the Indians on the roadside with a blanket. You know, you'd stop and buy stuff from us. So I decided to run, and I had learned in my graphic communications class how to use a platen press. Does anybody know what that is? It's an old printing press, and it just has a single handle and a plate, and you have to set all the type. Well, I made vote for me cards. So at the Arizona meeting, I passed those summers out, me and my kids. And I spent a few days doing that, and then back in the hospital. But I won. There were 14 of us. 4 of us were American Indian, and Arizona has the largest American Indian population in the world. So of numbers of tribes, they're just way more than I can even remember. But so I was elected, and I ended up being in the hospital, and they would call me to let me know what the delegation had been saying, and I'd get information. And they told me the things they wanted me to work on, and I said, well, I want to know why, because I didn't know about Medicaid. I didn't know what that was. It's too bad I didn't, because maybe I could have fought harder. There were specific issues that they were trying to guide us on, and I said, you know, I was elected for a reason, and if I feel that's right, I'll vote for it. If it's not right, I will abstain. That's what I would do for my delegation. But when I got there, the first thing I did was get into an argument with a woman over the poverty plank. It's a big, you know, it's like the platform for the president. It's called The Women on the Move, I think, is the book now that has that the whole plank. But the continuing committee wrote these very specific planks to go into this book. And we read them, and I read that one, and I was like, this is bullshit. There's nobody in this. Nobody helped write this that knows anything about being a woman on welfare, or knows anything about being poor, or they wouldn't have written this. So we complained. And I had gotten to say something about it, and then I went back to sit down, and this woman was sitting next to me, and we got into an argument. And I told her, you know nothing about being poor. Anyhow, I got up and I left, and my friend said, what were you saying to Betty Friedan? I didn't know who that was. I didn't know who any of these women were. They were just women who were working too. So I got into a good argument with her. Anyhow, things happened to me after that. I went into labor at the opening session. They set up a medical tent in the back. There were 2 of us who were pregnant, only I was in labor. Of course, and she was 10 months. This kid wasn't born, she was literally 10 months. So we were waiting for me. Heard she was going to drop right there on that floor, and I'm thinking, oh, please, please, no, not an Arizona Indian born in Texas, please, no. But we made it through, and because I was in labor, I started getting attention, and I didn't understand it because there were other pregnant women there too, and it was our Arizona senator who was doing it. She was running around telling people. And I remember seeing Diana everywhere. She was shooting everybody. I would see her with her camera all through the audience and thinking, look at that woman. We're going to have pictures to look at when this is done, and so we can remember it. And that was the thing I thought when she sent those pictures, like, oh God, I remember that. I remember this happened, and this happened, and this happened. I was just going to say some of the things that happened to me because of Houston. I got back and became involved in Arizona politics. Because I was so involved in Arizona politics, they decided to groom me for governor. They were going to run me for governor in 1987. I went to the White House and I met the president. I tease Era, my daughter. ERA was born right after we got back from Houston. And she's an amazing young woman with her own company now. But I'm sorry, I'm getting lost again. Beg your pardon? Yes, and I had to stay with the program. So that was the first. I went to the White House and got to meet the president, and I tell Era, her claim to fame, for sure, is she got to pee on a president. Carter hands her back to me and says, Mama, I think she needs you. I have a lot of stories about the White House. My favorite is about there not being any garbage cans on the first floor, and the blue room not one, because I had a diaper. But there's a whole story around that, and I'm not going to go into it. But anyhow, it was that way. I went from that to working with Now. Era became the national ERA baby. We've traveled. I was still working on women in welfare and trying to make changes there. I was elected as a delegate to the mid-year convention in Memphis, Tennessee, and I went. I had another Arizonan for ERA on my bag, my diaper bag from carrying the baby. And I got to talk to, they had asked me to speak, and I spoke. Bella asked me if I would. I almost punched Hamilton Jordan in the nose for calling me a bitch because I called him a liar. You know, so things happen. So I talked there, and then I was in the Women, Welfare, and Poverty, the meeting for that plank. I'm sorry, my mouth is extremely dry. And I was about to blow up. I was so angry. There was a woman at the thing saying that women on welfare just had babies so they could get more money. And I was like, she's an idiot. You get $30. It doesn't even buy diapers. And that was pre-Pampers. So I was about to blow up, and this nice lady, really sweet lady sitting next to me, reached over and went, pardon me, dear, pardon me. You come here and sit down before you lose it. Because I was in line to speak. And so I did. I sat down, and I'm dumping all this crap on her because I was so angry. And I was doing it quietly, but I was telling her how wrong this woman was and why she was wrong and what needed to happen for people like her. Because it wasn't her fault either. She was just ignorant about what it was like to be poor. So, but I was so angry, and she said, yes, I know. Yes, I know. She kept calming me. And all the time I'm doing this at her, I'm thinking, God, you look so familiar. Who are you? I know you. I've seen you somewhere before. I had just come from Washington. Because of the president, I was the chair of the Southwestern region for the International Women's Year Continuing Committee. And because of the president, well, I was on that committee, and then I got elected to chair it. And I had just come back from Washington, D.C. I went to Washington, D.C. for meetings, gone to the Capitol building to watch the Senate and the House in session, and then on to Tennessee. And all this time, I'm looking at this one, God, I know you somewhere, I know you. And then it hit who it was. And I just was so embarrassed. I thought I was going to die. It was like, oh my God, I just realized who you are. And she started laughing. It was Shirley Chisholm. Because of Shirley Chisholm, I chaired the welfare reform plank for Carter's re-election platform. She asked me if I would do it, and I said yes. I said, I don't know how. She said, oh yeah, you do. So it's just, my life has gone amazing. I used to be able to call the White House when Sarah Weddington was working for the president and see him. And I poured a glass of water on Phyllis Schlafly. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It was such an accident in the Senate dining room, thanks to Dennis DeConcini. But you know, it's like that. Gloria Steinem was one of my heroes, but Bella was like a close friend. And she used to call Era her grandbaby. My daughter's name is capital E, period, capital R, period, capital A, period, parentheses, Equal Rights Amendment, middle name Levi McCarthy. And she fought through school, being able to put her letter in all caps, no big E, small r, small a. Anyhow, I'm going to shut up. There's just so many stories, but you can see life has kind of changed for an Indian kid from the desert. And I spoke before a couple of congressional committees, and one was to change some of the welfare writing. And I came in and I said, well, I may be just a hick Indian from Arizona. And my friend Sue poked me and she said, hick Indian? I said, well, I am. Anyhow, thank you. And Diana, thank you for your work, and thank you for the history that you're giving us.
Hi, thank you so much. Before I speak and show my work, I just wanted to tell you that a friend of mine has been able to come, and I wanted to introduce her and ask her to come up. And that's Congresswoman Elizabeth Holtzman. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm really pleased to be able to be here because, you know, as the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And Diana took some pretty amazing pictures of me. I don't know how. Magic. And I won an election as a result. So thank you, Diana. It was a pretty important election. It had to do with the issues. The major issue in that election was the war in Vietnam. And the person I was challenging, who'd been in the House of Representatives for 50 years and was 84 years old at the time, was a major proponent of the war, and I was a major opponent of the war. And of course, we couldn't get any financing, and he had the support of every institution that existed. And still, with the help of an amazing photograph, we were able to win. And Diana, I don't remember how we got introduced. Oh, okay. Somebody who was a very important person in the Lindsay administration, with which I had been involved as an assistant, had recommended her. And she took a fabulous photo that we used of me against the background of the cables of the Brooklyn Bridge. You have to remember, Brooklyn is probably one of the hottest places in the world today. But in 1972, people just wanted to flee from Brooklyn. And I was thinking about it as a friend of mine was driving me here, very kindly driving me here, that, you know, those cables did kind of represent kind of bars, jail bars. People were I'm just joking. Actually, Brooklyn was a great place. It wasn't on the map yet, but it was an iconic picture that connected people with a location and was there to set the groundwork for what I stood for in this race. And so it was great to be photographed by Diana, whose views were very similar to mine on the issue of the Vietnam War and women's rights. And then, of course, it was not only astounding to win the election, but there was Diana at every kind of important event that had to do with women after that, particularly the Houston Convention, which she covered brilliantly. If you haven't seen the photos, you should look at them. The Houston Convention was inspired by Bella Abzug, and it was designed really to bring activist women from all over the United States to fight for women's rights. That was in 1976. Fast forward 40 years. We made some progress, but not enough. It's pretty horrifying to think that the candidate for president of the United States would so many years later still be attacking women and mistreating women and denigrating women. How far have we come? So I have to say, Diana was doing this work of recording and photographing the women's rights movement and the movement for women's equality before many people in this country were paying a lot of attention to it, were paying any attention to it. It was still a pretty small movement, although there were a lot of people who supported it, men and women. Today, I think it has broader support, but it doesn't have universal support. And I think it's just what I came here to say, and Diane asked me if I would say a few words, and the reason I want to say it is that she was a visionary. She took a subject, she's an artist, and she took a subject that really wasn't a matter of popular excitement or concern, and tried to record it in an artistic way, not just for history, but to make people understand the importance and the significance of it, and to see faces of the women who tried to make a difference, like Shirley, or Gloria, or Betty Friedan, or Bella, Yvonne Burke, Barbara Jordan, a lot of people in the early days who were kind of lonely pioneers in this effort, and of course there were women before that. But I think the amazing thing is, Diana, is that you're really a visionary about this subject. And it's a subject that's as important as any other in the world, because frankly, if women had half the power, we wouldn't have a world in this shape. So, thank you. Thank you for your vision. Thank you for your work, and more power to you. And thanks too to the organizers of this event and to the University of Massachusetts for your vision in making a home for Diana's work. Thank you. It's a great contribution to women's movement, to photography, to art, and to visionaries like Diana. So Diana, thank you, and I'm so proud of you. I'm glad to be here to celebrate today.
Thank you very much. Liz, I went out deliberately to photograph for history. So what you said is, I'm sorry. Liz said it just right, because that's exactly what I did when I went out to these different events where sometimes I was the only photographer with Betty Lane, was that I was photographing this for history. So, and Ellen Shub is with us today. And do you want to stand up, Ellen? I'd love it if people could recognize you too, because Ellen is a sister in photography in the women's movement, and she's one of the people who also has done that work, and I appreciate it so much. So I wanted to thank you, each and every one of you. My life in photography is so intertwined with yours. each and every one of you here today. After being a child growing up in an era when children were seen and not heard, and then growing into a woman in an era when women were seen and not heard, photography became my voice. In an age when our generation likewise discovered and adopted speaking truth to power. There is an expression that I learned in Nepal and that everyone now knows, namaste. I greet, salute, acknowledge the divine in you. It is in that spirit that I greet, salute, and acknowledge you here today. And the people who encouraged, inspired, enlightened, and bedeviled me as I photographed them. I include their names when I know them as part of that tribute. I thank God for the light. I will tell my walk through history with expressions of thanks. Thank you to my mother, Edith N. Trotter Henry, who set standards so high for herself and for others that I could never achieve them. But it's been a grand life trying. Thank you to my father, Carl Henry, for his passion for ultimate issues, for deciphering the grand plan behind events, for sharing with me his enamoration with media, journalism, advertising, photography, and film. My parents' support financed my career. Thanks to Grandma and Grandpa, Clara and August Levy for their generous invitations to join on trips, and to Aunt Emily for being a guiding light. Thanks to cousins David and Nancy for being there part of the way in great company. Thanks to Aunt Ray for saying that my daughter could be president someday. And to Uncle Jack N. Trotter for good times running through the Sands Hotel and for giving me the family's first and only TV when I was 15 and for getting me that great summer job during college. And thank you so much, Melba, for being here with me. Wait, I'm not done yet. Thank you to my governess, Agathe Durbano, who came to me when I was 2.5 and gave me the gift of the French language and which to dream and live an alternate life. Thanks to Blanchette forever, my guardian angel. Thanks to Zola, Flaubert, and Camus, who let me look into the human soul deeper and more intricately than any human being ever has. Thanks to George Simenon for a real-life literary adventure. Thanks to Pierrette Fleutiot for asking me to teach my first photography class as a cover for her affair with one of her students. and for putting my photograph on the cover of the first novel of her illustrious career. Thanks to my friends Cynthia, Barbara, Monique, and Tanya, who shared and sometimes led the journey for me. The memories of Haiti, France, and Cincinnati are now shared at the Du Bois. Thank you for every laugh and spoof, Barbara Esty. I owe you for your faith in my photographs. These are treasures, you used to say, in the dark days. Thanks to Julian Levy, who taught me photography at the Harvard Crimson, and to Tim Carlson and others, with whom the all-night sessions sharpened my vision and kept me in school. Thanks to Ben Levy, classmate and reunion co-chair, who gave me the opportunity to show my work in a big solo exhibit at our 25th Class of 1969 reunion, and also to speak on photography as a political art at our 40th. Thanks to my photography pals, who more or less believed in and taught me, others who thought I was cute and didn't teach me much. Roland Sherman, Steve Eisenberg, Julian Wasser, Peter B. Kaplan, John Wilkes, Stephen Bournes, Mika Bar-Am, Thanks to Cornell Kappa, who had the brainstorm to ask me to develop a community workshop program for the International Center for Photography, and Via Winroth, who asked me to teach black and white and Cibachrome photography there. It is an honor and a pleasure that Anna Winand, Pat Blue, and Steve Rooney from the ICP are here today. To Arnold Newman, the great Ernst Haas, and to Berenice Abbott, who signed my application for membership in the professional organization, the ASMP, quote, sponsored enthusiastically. Thanks to my role models, inspiring women of photography much too little known, Alice Austin, Giselle Freund, Louise Dahl-Wolf, Lida Moser, Margaret Mather. The list would take another night or another talk to make right. Thanks to Margaret Peggy Riggs Buckwalter for leading the charge that I seconded to mark Alice Austin's grave, to name a Staten Island ferry in her honor, to save her house, and to create the Alice Austin House Museum there in her name. Thank you. Thanks to David Wolper in his white bathrobe in Cannes for not taking me to the casting couch in order to give me my summer job before senior year as publicity assistant for If It's Tuesday, This Must Be Belgium. One of the great B movies of all time. Thanks to Peter Reich for his night editing of my general assignment reporting at the Staten Island Advance. Here's one of the articles I wrote about Ed. And to others I met there. Gone but not forgotten, Bill Hughes, Jack Turcotte, thanks to the McGovern Gang, Pat Funt, Ethan Ghetto, Jan Levy, and Stuart Braceman. Thanks to my first client and staunch supporter from then until now. It really was, I think, my first job. I don't think Liz would have hired me if she'd known that. Via her campaign manager. And if you Google Liz Holtzman, you'll see my 2 photographs there for that campaign. To Dan McNamee and Rick Hirsch for entree to the Democratic National Convention, Miami Beach, 1972, and to Dick Tuck for publishing me in Reliable Source there and in 1976. Thanks to the magnanimous and elegant patrons who opened the doors to society in those wild and wonderful years. Jeanette Watson, Donald Dial Jr., Charles Ron Fry, Malcolm Forbes, and the Forbes family. Thanks to Germain School of Photography, Mr. Hollingsworth, who taught me to process Ectacolor prints, expertise that I carried on in teaching Cibachrome at the ICP. For Jim Smith, for making me staff photographer for Brooklyn Today. Thanks to Douglas Matthews, who got me hired by Boston Magazine to photograph the bicentennial at Concord and Lexington and the opening of the JFK Library. Thanks to my ex, Noelle Mapstead, for introducing me to the Lower East Side scene, for posing on the eve of our divorce, and for asking me to meet him at Esalen, the night when Joan Baez, Bonnie Raitt, and Baba Olatunji were drumming and singing and dancing. My thanks cannot be adequately expressed to Bella Abzug, who gave the kick in the pants that all her young acolytes deserved and thrived on, and that truly drove us to do greater things than we ever thought she knew we could. Thanks to Sylvia Ortiz, torchbearer for the last mile of the opening of the First National Women's Conference, for being with us here today. Thanks to Gloria Steinem, who has been a faithful correspondent, especially in recent years, and with whom I share the passion for the term Ms., a term no one under 30 knows the meaning of today. It's true, I ask when I show my photographs. Thank you to Phyllis Chesler for being one feminist whose affection I am blessed with, and to Lucy Commissar, Linda Garcia Merchant, Sheila Tobias, Joe Freeman, Jane DeHart Matthews, Linda Kerber, and UMass's own wonderful Laura Lovett. Without publicists, writers, and friends like Gil Wintering, I would not have photographed Jackie O. Anne Obert Weinberg assigned me to photograph the Ballet Trocadero de Monte Carlo, Kevin Lewis, the party at MoMA for Lillian Gish, and Ken Burns, my last assignment, and many others who sent work my way that formed me and my legacy. Tom Jones for Introduction to the Forbes Family, Jeanette Watson, Salvador Dali, and Ultraviolet, Alice Heyman by Joe Freeman, for photographing Stuart Mott and Alice Neal, William Vanden Heuvel for the thrill of being on stage with James Brown at Rikers Island. Wow. Writing history with my photographs has required being a curator and chaperone for my work. Thanks to Matt Saunders for so faithfully executing my vision for my website since 2003 and for creating its fabulous slideshow functionality. Thanks to Carol Levine, who gave me my first retrospective in 1982 at the Ballard Mill Center for the Arts in Malone, New York. There hasn't been another one until now, so thank you to UMass. And to Bloom Magruder and Earthwatch for asking me to photograph one-room schools and school teachers. Thanks to Gail Epps, whose video was the first and so informally elegant, and that you can see here and online. I've enjoyed teaching photography since 1973, but some of my most difficult assignments have been in the role of mentor and to interns who came and went over the years. Thank you to Ashley Martinelli, the latest and the best. I hope to be given another chance or two to be a good one if you will send any young people who can spell my way. The internet brings new ways to share my work. It is also a precious way to reconnect, as with Amy Trompeter, whose puppets you see here, and Anna Georgi, who's here today, who with Women and Life on Earth organized the Women's Pentagon Action. That would be a talk of its own. I would like to share my appreciation for the part that these people played in my photographs and who have extended graciousness now in return that we know each other again. Jennifer Lowenstein Littlefield and Kate Lowenstein, Hare Krishna devotees photographed on Fifth Avenue in 1973, and who now write me just a couple of weeks ago that they want the photographs of themselves and their wife. Fran Leibowitz, Herman Badillo, Ron Kovic, and finally, to end this love fest, namaste to Don Caraco and the Vietnam veterans of the Concord to Boston Common Memorial Day Action 1971. Rusty Sachs also honors us here with his presence today. Would all of you who have been in my talk or in my life come up and join me? You may have a few words to say, or there may be questions, but please come and stand with me so we can see who the cohort is. Thank you.